"Holy shit," John said. "I'm gonna go back to my car and get some gloves. I'll bring some for everyone," I said, as I walked away from the crime scene. I started walking across the field again. I was dragging my feet as I walked to try to get some of the hay off of my shoes. It was odd. I felt as if I was being watched as I walked through the field. I looked left and right along the tree line, but I didn't see anybody. I turned around and still, I didn't see a single person besides the officer who took the horses out of the barn. He was crouched, picking up grass, attempting to feed the horses. I turned back and walked towards the car. From the field, you walk along a fence that's along the side yard of the house. The house has 2 windows on that side. I could have been seeing things. But I swear I saw a curtain move and someone's hand go behind it. I decided to go back inside the house. I figured it was just the other officers who were called. I walked up the front steps and into the door. As I entered, I got lightheaded and dizzy. Everything I saw flashed and went from blue to green and back to blue. It happens, though. I think I remember reading somewhere it's from adrenaline kicking in really fast. I made my way through the room that I saw on the other side of the house with a big moving curtain. I've only been in this house a handful of times, usually just Christmas or other major family events. I knew Anna from high school, so her family and I were close. I found the room that I'd seen the hand in and entered. It just had a bunch of boxes in it. Like a storage room. I went to the window and moved the curtain. The curtains were dusty as if they hadn't been moved in a long time. The air started to get heavy. It was almost suffocating. I didn't see anybody in the room or the room next to it, which had the second window on the side of the house. I started to go to my car and I ran into one of the officers who were in charge of the crime scene in the house. "We're almost done here. I have one body and, well, one head, correct? I mean, you were the first officer to enter the house, right?" he asked. "One body? No, there's 2 bodies. And it wasn't just a head, it was a whole body, and the body split in 2. The upper half is mounted," I said. "Oh, we have the mounted body, but not the whole second body. There's the body mounted on the wall and the lower half beneath it, and a head outside. No second body," he assured me. I walked as fast as I could into the office. He wasn't lying. The body of Anna's mom was missing. "No one took the body of the old woman out of here? None of your officers?" I demanded. I was getting pretty mad. "No, we just got here." "Well, bodies don't just get up and walk away. Then where is the head you found?" I asked, but I assumed it was the head of Anna's mom. "You didn't see it?" the officer asked. "It's outside." Now, keep in mind, we did not touch it or move it or anything. We found it right where it is. I walked outside. There was a trail of brown, dried blood in the dirt path going to the gravel driveway. I followed it around the back of my car. Along with the driver's side, the head was sitting on my hood. Who the hell put it there? There wasn't just a decapitated head when we first got here. I walked around to the front of my car. The head was facing that way, and it was Anna's head. It was terrible. Every single one of her teeth were out of the gums and were shoved into her cheeks and forehead, and her eyes were missing as usual when it comes to Stitch. I lost her right there. I got on my knees. I began to cry. It was the first time I cried since I was a kid. With the never-ending disappointment from my parents as a kid and the constant beating, I learned how to hold back my emotions as a... It felt good. It really did. My eyes burned, my chest hurt, but it was worth it. It felt like a sack of bricks were lifted off my chest and shoulders so I could think clearly. "Did you know her?" the office behind me asked. "She was my partner. At the Seattle Police Department. I've known her most of my life, I said, trying to make out a clear sentence. Stitch is gonna pay for this, I swore to myself. I got up off the ground and opened the driver's side door and popped my trunk. I grabbed a pair of disposable gloves from a box along with a pair for the other officers in the barn. I don't want to see that on my hood when I get back. Would you mind hosing down my car? I asked. Sure, I guess, he said. I turned to walk back to the barn, and just as I did, I heard a loud neigh from one of the horses. I quickly walked around the house and hopped the fence, going into the pasture. I jogged over to the officer who was with the horse. One of them was on the ground. Is it dead? I asked. Yeah, it passed. We're calling in some people to come take care of this one, though. If it's not too late. I should be here soon, he said. I walked back into the barn. Everyone else who I left there was still standing in a circle. Everybody but John, who was sitting in a corner sobbing. I walked to the back of the barn to see what everybody was looking at. There was the rest of Anna's body. Her upper torso in the middle, her legs and her arms ripped off, laying feet away. She still had a rope around her wrists and ankles. Stitch killed her just as people in his village killed him. I definitely think he's trying to send a message by killing her the way he did. I'm gonna go, John. Do you want to come with me or catch a ride with the FBI? I said. Don't leave me here with them, he said. I nodded at him and hopped into my car as fast as I could. John got in a minute later, telling the FBI that we were leaving. I didn't think that they would be following us now. I looked at the clock. 3 a.m. I yawned. I was getting really tired now that the gore wasn't fueling my adrenaline. We started driving out of Bellingham. And silence once more. Both of us were exhausted. I put the radio on to try to keep us awake. After a while, the buildings of the city started to become sparse again. As we left the main part of town, the radio started to go to static. Every channel I tried was static. I started getting nervous because of how the videos went to static on the second victim's death. I saw a white building start to appear in the distance ahead of us. As we pulled up, we saw it was a Catholic parish. A giant church. I usually laugh at those, but Catholic parishes aren't considered mega churches. Something in me clicked. With all the blood, guts, and gore I'd seen, something in me needed to go talk to God. Maybe he could provide some insight in this case. Maybe he could help me regain my sanity and get on track to solving this case. I pulled over and parked. I'm gonna go in, talk to God for a little bit. I need some help, I said, as I unbuckled. I'll stay here. I'm not Christian. Jewish, he said. Okay, I said. I opened the door and got out of the car. Back into the cold. I walked into the church. It was enormous inside. It had to be to hold 2,000 plus worshippers. I walked past a few stone pillars with holy water in them. Then I walked out of the lobby and into the worship area. There were candles lit all over the place. It shone on the stained glass and made Jesus' statue look really eerie. His crown of thorns created a shadow on his face, and the blood on his hands were black as night. I walked down the aisle between the pews. I walked down one and kneeled on the ground in the middle, put my hands together, and set my forehead on them. God, I started. I didn't really know what to say. I need help. I'm scared all the time, paranoid. Then all of a sudden, all the candles went out. It was weird enough being alone in a church in the middle of the night, but it just got scary when all the light was gone. I got up off my knees and looked around, spinning in circles. As I turned back around to look at the candles behind the podium, I heard loud bangs, all of the doors being slammed shut. I turned back around to look at the doors I came in through. I slowly started walking towards them. I could barely see 2 feet in front of me. I stumbled a couple of times on some benches, startling myself each time. I made a thud. As I reached the door, on the wall next to it, I saw my shadow. There was a flickering light coming from behind me. I turned around and I saw the first and last row of candles were lit. That was when I started to hear a cracking sound. It wasn't a cracking sound like the fingers and necks and spines I've been forced to listen to over the past few months. It sounded like plastic or even porcelain cracking. I looked up at the statue of Jesus on the cross. He had a long crack going across his chest. It was crumbling right in the middle of his chest. I got closer, and as I got closer, it felt like the room was getting colder. I reached out to touch the statue, and as I did, the crumbling center of his chest fell out and knocked over a bunch of candles. It was Stitch. It knew it was Stitch. The hole was right where his heart would be. The statue was bleeding. Out of the hole, his hands, his feet, his head, his eyes. I was back on my knees and I closed my eyes. I've never done it before, but I began to pray. I didn't know how, so I just pleaded for protection. As I was pleading, I heard laughter. That awful laughter that's been haunting me since the beginning of the case. I needed to get out of here. I ran to the doors, but they were all locked. I started to panic. I started to bang on the doors. I turned back around, and I heard a loud thump. It was to the right of me. I saw a Bible go flying across the room, and it hit a confession booth. I took 2 steps forward, and as I did, more Bibles began to fly across the room, smacking into the confession booths. Was it a sign? I had no idea. I started walking towards the booths. I knew I still wouldn't be safe, considering what had happened to repetitive routine, but I didn't care. I didn't want to see Stitch's face again. I opened the first booth and went in. I sat on the bench, buttoning up my jacket all the way and pulling the top over my mouth. Then it all started. The flames of a candle went shooting into the air in the next booth, hitting the top of the booth and going flat. As it died down, I could make out someone in there.
Hello, my son.
The familiar dark voice said. Father? I asked, gulping.
You can call me that if you like. It's much better than what you've been calling me.
The voice said, beginning to chuckle. Why are you doing this? I asked. But I knew I wasn't going to get a straight answer.
Why?
Stitch asked.
Well, you went into the confessional first. I am here to forgive you of your sins.
You're not a religious man. You're a monster. A demon! I yelled. Stitch then began to laugh hysterically. I sat there looking at him through the mesh between the 2 sections. This whole time, he was looking at the confession booth door. He didn't look at me once. I'm gonna kill you for all that you've done. For Anna! I yelled again. I looked back up at the other booth, and Stitch had his face pressed against the screen. He was smiling at me. I moved from left to right and his face moved with me. I still didn't know how he was able to follow me like that. What with the skin stretched over his eye sockets. I closed my eyes and put my hands on my face. It was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. After a couple of minutes, I looked back up. Stitch was gone. I sighed and ran my fingers through my hair. I sat back on the bench and just stared off. I couldn't remember what I was thinking about, but it was deep. All of a sudden, I heard a door open in the distance, footsteps getting closer and closer. They were fast-paced and small. I could tell it was a girl. "Is anybody in the church?" she said. "Yeah, I'm in the confessional," I said, still not fully thinking straight. "Are you okay? You sound distraught," she asked. "Yeah, I'm okay. Don't worry about it," I assured her. "Well, why don't you come out of there and get some fresh air?" she said. I came out of the booth. It was still dark. There were about 5 candles lit by the podium. I tried focusing my eyes to the darkness, and I began looking around. I finally saw the woman. She was a nun in the back of the church. On the opposite side of where I was, she was standing in the shadows. All I could see was the upper half of her body and her head. Something didn't seem right about her. She just stood there, not moving at all, staring at me. "Would you like to talk about anything?" she asked. As she talked, she looked almost puppet-like. Her mouth moved straight up and down. Her face never changed. It was expressionless. "Are you okay?" I asked. I wasn't sure about her. "What do you mean?" she asked as she blinked. Again, she blinked and her face didn't change. It stayed stiff and plain. Her skin was extremely pale as the trimming on her habit. I felt sick. I decided I'd go home before anything else happens. "I'm going to go now," I said while walking towards the door. The nun started moving. I could tell that she wasn't walking. It was like she was bouncing, kind of. She stayed in the shadows, though, only showing her upper half. "I don't trust you," I said. The nun started laughing. She had a high-pitched girl laugh that echoed. Halfway through her laugh, she started getting deeper. I knew it was Stitch now, but where was he?
"I see I can't fool you,"
His booming dark voice echoed.
"Would you like to see my latest toy?"
he said. As he said that, the nun started bouncing towards the candles. I walked backwards as she got closer to the podium. My back was almost against the door. She got in the light of the candles. I was horrified. Stitch was standing right behind her, and he was also wearing a habit. Not only was he wearing it, but he had a crown of thorns on his head. It looked like his arm was around her.
"This is one of my favorites,"
he said while laughing. He started humming. I saw what was going on. He started spinning around with the nun. He wasn't holding on to her at all. He had his left arm in her back, a big bloody hole in her back. His elbow was bent, as if his forearm and hand were her head. He made her bounce like a child would make a Barbie doll bounce when they would pretend the Barbie was walking. As she bounced around, walking around the stage, her arms flailed in all directions. Stitch repeatedly opened her mouth and closed it. I could hear her teeth slamming shut, even in the back where I was. It made my mouth hurt. He made her blink a couple of times. Then he picked her up with both hands and slammed her on the ground.
"She was fun, but I'm done with her now,"
he said.
"I need a new thing to play with."
He finished his sentence and I started looking around for a way out. I looked towards the statue of Jesus at the front of the room. Something about the statue was different than minutes before. I could see something in the chest. I squinted my eyes and got a little bit closer. I saw hands coming out of the hole in his chest. We were facing opposite directions. I started to get closer with each step. I could hear someone singing some sort of religious song. It wasn't in English, though, so I had no idea what they were saying. I started going up the steps towards the statue. I froze in terror at what I saw. The hand started pulling apart the chest of the statue, and a hand popped out. It was repetitive routine. I recognized his hair and his face from my dream. He didn't say anything. He just crawled out of the statue and fell on the ground on what was left of his legs. He landed right on his femur, and the cracking, snapping sound made me want to rip my ears off. He started pointing behind me. I didn't want to turn my back on him, but I couldn't help it. I turned around and I saw Stitch standing right in front of a big stained glass window. He ripped off his cloak and started to rub his chest. He rubbed from his chest, around the burning cross on his chest, up his neck and onto his face. He started humming again. And as he hummed, the main door opened again. I turned around as fast as I could to run out. I took 2 steps and then I heard bubbling. I looked up and I saw the holy water was boiling. I didn't know what to do. I turned back around and saw Stitch running towards me, full speed and yelling like a madman. I blacked out. I don't remember anything after that. When I woke up, I was in FBI custody. I was lying on a bed in the infirmary of the prison downtown. I jerked up and rubbed my face to wake myself up. How long have I been out? I asked the woman on the other side of the room. Just a few hours. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. Some FBI people want to talk to you when you feel up to it, she said. I put my feet on the ground and stretched before standing up. Where do they want to see me? I asked. She pointed out the door. Someone's been waiting for you outside, she said. I walked out the door to the familiar plain hallway. On a wooden bench on the wall, there was the man who interrogated me the first time. He gestured for me to follow when he stood up. We walked down the hall and walked into the same room that we'd been in before. I sat down at the table again and waited for something to happen. The man left the room and came back with a folder. He sat down across from me. Okay. First things first. We know you stole the journal in your file, but that's not the real issue here. You're being charged with vandalism, he said. What? I said what? I said loudly. I nearly burst from the chair I was sitting on. What do you think I vandalized? The answer was obvious, but I couldn't be sure. They were pinning all kinds of crap on me. The church, the man said. I shook my head at him. I didn't do anything. I just watch the tapes. It's a mega church. They probably have cameras everywhere, I said. The man looked stunned. Apparently I was better at his job than he was. How hard is it to look at tapes before trying to convict someone? Fine, the man said. We'll call you back in when we prove you did it. I thanked him and stood up. I walked out of the building, and the sun burned my eyes. It was sunny, for once. Maybe that's a good sign. Maybe my visit to the church did some good. I found my car outside. They must have towed it here after they found me. I got in my car and drove to my apartment. I didn't know what was going to happen. But the sun made me hopeful.